Hi there, and welcome to Conversations for Men That Women Need to Hear. Today we're talking about happiness jealousy, being jealous of somebody else's happiness. That is a thing, and I'm sure if you're in a relationship that's strained, you've probably felt that. This show is brought to you by ChewOnThis Media LLC and Visualize Unlimited LLC. I'm Angeline Chu Longshore, along with
Zelis Daniel.
Awesome. So this is a thing that you talked about zealous with me, and we have so much to unpack about this topic. So much goes into it with also the angry kind of woman, and we've talked about some of those things. Um, I know that in my relationship, I am not jealous of happiness. And so that relationship works really well. I mean, I'm not jealous of his happiness, but with some relationships that you've experienced, you've had that experience. So tell me
Mhm.
about that. Let's unpack it.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like it's kind of a real thing when uh, I feel like I've had success or had something fun going on, and you think that your partner would be happy, and they're kind of like they're not genuinely happy for you. You feel it, and then it's almost like you're wondering. You're like, oh, I'm gonna go and do this thing, and they're kind of like, you can tell that it's not that they're unhappy or that they don't want you to do it, but there's like a jealousy there, like no, I want you to be happy. I want you to go do this thing. But then, like, you could tell they're kind of like, I wish I was doing that thing. Or, there's just like an underlying grudge there that has resentment towards it. And it seems like it's a real thing, and it starts to build into that like tit for tat. And I'm curious if we've got any good solutions for it, or just to like recognize what we can do about that. Because, it seems like jealousy is going to be a self, a feeling that you're in charge of. If you're feeling jealous, somebody else isn't going to be able to de-escalate that. Or it's like, I think it's really a matter of just kind of like looking at that and wondering, and I think talking about things is going to be the way to overcome that. But yeah, I'm open to input it because we need to figure out how to diffuse that tension.
Yeah, and I'm sure that when you feel the jealousy that your partner has toward you, then it causes probably a ripple effect of things that happen in your behavior, and then the family suffers. And so
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that before we get into the what's going on with the woman. I just want to hear
Yeah.
how that plays out.
I don't think you necessarily understand what's happening in that moment. You're kind of like, we rely on the literal, like, well, this is what they said. This is what she said. No, go ahead and do that. I'm happy you're doing this thing. But then, like, you feel the underlying tension and currents there. Or maybe, you don't talk about it. You just sense it. So and, and I think that people try to cover it up. It's like, you don't want to, well, I'm not jealous of you. You deserve this. You go and do it. But then there's this underlying resentment that, then you start to wonder what it is. I think that that's one of the real frustrations in relationships, and strained relationships especially, is you don't know what the problem is. So you start guessing these hypothetical guesses, and you start dancing on eggshells thinking, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, you know maybe it's money stress, maybe it's something I don't even know anything about. I'm just gonna, and the best thing, for the most part, it's like, I just got to take care of me, and hopefully they'll take care of themselves. But then, it definitely comes back to being stressed and strained. It's like the kids become more feisty and start, what ends up happening, I think, is that you end up in your head, and then your kids are trying to get your attention, and then that irritates you. And then the kids realize that, oh, I'm getting attention from irritating you, or bothering you. So then it's like very much a snowball effect, where you just, that's how people just get overwhelmed.
It sounds like a lot of confusion. If it's one word, it causes a lot of confusion. So because of that confusion, then there's a lot of reactions to that confusion that actually doesn't have to be there. It's like it's causing this huge thing. So if we look at the basis to this jealousy. And it really comes down to a person feeling like an individual, because if somebody is jealous of somebody else, that means that they feel separate. They feel like they don't have. So there's that feeling of lack, and looking at envy with the other person, like, oh, they have so much, or they have, I think for women, it's, oh, men have so much freedom. They don't have to do all the things that we have to do. And that's a modern woman's perspective right now, unfortunately. But they see themselves as separate, and that whatever is happening for the man is his reward. And so the difference with what could be is that if a woman feels, if a woman and a man come together in a way where they are literally in a team dynamic, like if you think about, say, a basketball team, and there's one player who's like the ball hog. I mean, we've all seen that person. We all know that person. And it's like the team is winning, but there's like a, you know, and so, you know, the man can be winning, and the family could feel like, okay, great for the dad, but there's just this feeling of, you know, we're not together on it. And I'm not saying that the man is off doing his own thing and being selfish at all. It's just an understanding. It's a perspective. So if both parties, the man and the woman, are actually on the same team, you know, thinking and motivated by everything they do as, this is literally for the best of the family. And when it's best for the family, which we've talked about before, if it's best for the family, then it's actually best for the individual too. So, because if the family is supported, then everybody can relax into that support of the family and not be divisive. If we're all in it for the individual's sake, then we are just setting up an antagonistic tug of war every single time. So, you know, that's where this comes from, is this feeling like I've got to get mine. And then that sets a woman in this place of, well, he's off doing that. Well, I've got to get mine, and I have to go do this. So then she feels like she has to fight for what she has. And then another thing, the angry Karen, you know, that we've talked about before, is that it's part of the jealousy. And so she feels like she has to assert her right. She's got to like fight for it, show her power, show her strength, be that obnoxious woman, because she's feeling like not supported. She's in her individual, like, compartmentalized pod without feeling anybody's support, even though the man is fully doing all the things that she's saying that she wants him to do. But the dynamic, there's so much underlying that both of them are not realizing needs to happen in a truly supportive team relationship. And so that is what I'm proposing as like the new modern marriage, the new way to move forward. So it's not natural in our culture these days. It's not set up for that. So it has to be a conscious knowing that we're doing this. And when I tell people about it, that they can get their minds wrapped around it. They can, but it takes implementing with both parties and an understanding of the entire cultural norm that goes against that. So, because if you don't understand it, the tactics of the actual doing, those are small tactics, and you feel like, oh, I tried that and it failed. I tried that and it doesn't work, because it's not really motivated by a full understanding of the entire landscape of what we're trying to do. So it is big, but it's not big. It's like once you understand it, then you can go through the motions of these little things that you do in your routine daily life. And if you're both on board with that, it's not a huge sacrifice. There's actually no compromise. You feel a lot more directed and unified in what you're doing. So once you get on board, you feel so much more supported, both of you. But it is an understanding. So that's why I've written a book, and I'm about to publish the audio of it, because I feel like there's so much here that we talk about that is great information. And if you want to go that one more step, and I'm not trying to sell books, I really don't care about the money. I just want people to be able to have these tools. And I really hope that families can shift with these tools. So, that's why I'm talking about this book, because I can't put a whole entire book in one episode. But while you're here, you can listen to what we're talking about and relate to it. So this happiness thing, this being jealous of the happiness, I see it being played out. And it's hard because I see it making a man not like more groveling, like, no, I'll do whatever you want, and so he almost feels bad, like he walks around, like figuratively, feeling bad for his freedom, feeling bad for being a privileged man. And that's not how a man should walk around. I mean, that actually doesn't help the dynamic of the relationship. A woman will become like, think of you as a wimp after a while. Not maybe think of you, but just sense like, why am I not attracted to him anymore? There's a lot of that going on. Like, I don't know why, but I'm not attracted to him anymore. And he just doesn't seem like the man that I married. There's people that say that. And that's because the man is reacting to this dynamic, and he wants to support the woman and get on her side and not feel like he's the object of envy, because he's so free and problem solving and able to do, like, I see you do, Zealous, I see you do it all the time. You're like, okay, well, that's not working, so I'm gonna do this and do this and do this. And it almost doesn't sit well with the woman, because she's like, well, how can he just change like that? How can he just make these plans and handle the kids and da 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 da? It's not exactly what I would do, so it's not right. And it's that separate and not together that causes the jealousy with that. So does that play out in your head? I mean, do you see that playing out in your relationship?
I totally do. And I think there's a bit of an element of like wanting what the other person has, where it's like, it's not really what they want, but when you see somebody else have something, then you want it. You see it with kids. It's just like, everybody wants to play with the same toy all the time. It's like, don't touch my toy, even though I'm not playing with it, so it's I think there's a lot of that element that's just this, wanting the greener grass scenario instead of appreciating what you have. I feel like it's an interesting situation of for relationships where you have the man being the main breadwinner, versus like the woman being the main breadwinner, or like the woman that wants to go and be the full-time working mom. It's like, well, is that what you really want? Because like the idea of being able to like be a stay-at-home dad and be financially supported doesn't sound bad to me at all, so it's, and I think that's, part of where this flip is happening in families. And it's an interesting one, because I think that ultimately, women are going to be a little better at mothering and being the full-time parent. And I think that it also requires they need to have a supportive team. And maybe that's, just talking about this, maybe that's a big part of the real problem, is that, in these relationships where the dynamic flips and you have more stay-at-home dads, the stay-at-home dads don't have that same network of other stay-at-home dads or other stay-at-home mothers to help, build that community vibe that we know is so important in having a thriving home life, is having that like community support. So, things get changed around, and it's like, well, what is it that you really wanted? Is it like, did you really want to go and work a 50-hour work week and have to like, be competitive in a work environment? Or did you want to have more time with your kids, more time in your home, and I think men are kind of in a position of like, you know, I'll do whatever I have to do to take care of my family and provide for it. But, if you're not happy doing this, I'll stay at home and you can go, we can go and try it. And then they get the flip side, and then the women are equally frustrated. It's just like, well, now I have to go and work. And then when I get home, I have to do everything that I have to take care of the kids and do all of these mothering things that mothers do and want to have done because that's the way that it was before they went to work full time. So then they're just, I think there's a lot of frustration going on there for those women, and that's where that anger is coming from. Is, um, I didn't like the way things were, so we changed, and now I'm even more stressed out because I have to work full time, and I still have to do all the stuff I want to do to make my home my home.
Right.
Because you're not doing it the way I want it.
And men have shifted so much for the woman, and she's still angry. Well, it's so interesting because I
That's
have had a lot of conversations in the school parking lot with dads about this exact thing. And all the dads were in the parking lot because they drove the kids to school because they were taking care of the kids. Switched, from the working out their dad to now the mom wants to work and do her thing. Whether she's making a lot of money or not, she wanted to do her own thing. So he's picking up the slack. So I talked to a cross section of men who were these types of dads. And they sort of said the same thing because a man will do whatever it is to protect his family. That is instinct. That is what bears and lions and, all male animals do. And so they're like, okay, that's what she wants. I'll pick up the kids. I'll, get them dressed, get the lunches. Kids are hanging like off the dad, and as he brings like the 4 kids to school or whatever it is, and he loves it, and you love it. That's the thing. It's like the men love it. They're like, cool. I'll do whatever it takes. So, it's not. It really is not the fault of the man for this dynamic, and it is, but it is not the fault of the woman. It's like it's the fault of a culture that told the woman that she needs to do these things. But there actually is research. I've looked into this. There's actually research that when a mom stays home, then the children are more well adjusted emotionally. They have much more confidence to go into the world. And what psychologists are seeing these days with this type of dynamic happening culturally is there's a lot more ADHD, there's a lot of emotional issues, anxiety for kids. There's a lot of feelings that were not happening before this dynamic happened. So it's quite interesting that women haven't shifted even though their kids are suffering because there's such a strong pull culturally for them to fulfill this role. And then when they are in that male role, because they have to be in the workplace, because they have to put on that power, it's not even a power suit anymore, but it's just the energetic way of being in that power suit in your job, then it just shifts the whole dynamic, and children can't attach to that kind of woman when she's in that mode. And I've been there where I came into my relationship as a television producer from Hollywood. And so, and I ran teams and I had to do things where you are in charge, but it's a really different in charge when you're a mother and being like a matriarch energy, which is supportive rather than more delegating and more, okay, you've got that, and being the alpha really. And so it's, the woman who's doing all this sets some things in motion that are not great for her relationship with her husband and also not great for the children and ultimately not great for her because, as you said, they feel put upon. I say put upon, but like exhausted, like it's still, everything's still on their plate. They feel like everything, even if they give it to the man, they have to double check his work. And that's instinct, women. So, and men, it's like a woman is not trying to get on your case, but it's her instinct to make sure that her home life, like the mama lion, make sure that all the babies are nursing well, are healthy, are eating. And so she can't help it that she double checks your work, cleanliness, because people can get sick if the house is not cleaned up. It's all instinct. And then the culture that is layered on top of that brings her alpha into it. So it comes off as really critical and really Karen, that if you don't know what that is, look it up. But that Karen like energy that's very like critical and bossy and like angry. And it's her instinct that's telling her to do that. But she's spread herself so thin based on what culture is asking her to do. So this is the dynamic that's playing out. And her jealousy is like, you only have to do this, even if it's just take care of the kids, just. But she's asked you to do that, but she still is like, look, he's like done now and he's putting his feet up, because I've come home now. But you've done what like all housewives have done in the past, and they still felt like they did their job and were exhausted and had to keep going. And, so it's just it's a different dynamic when, I've said this before, but when men put their feet up, and I see Aaron doing it, my husband, he's actually processing. Like, and I know you men know this. You need a time, a transition time. You need a processing time. You need I'm going to get into the next project that I have on my plate time, or you're thinking internally. And that doesn't happen for women. Women are always talking things out. And I know you're sick of it because that's not how men process. But they are, so when they don't see you physically moving and physically talking, they think that you are relaxing. And that to them is like, in their eyes, maybe like, why do you get to relax when I'm continuing to stomp around doing what I have to do? That's the modern
Yeah.
day, what's happening.
Yeah. And then you go and you put a smartphone in their hand, and it's even more frustrating for them. I feel like, touching on this like topic of jealousy, I think that it's a really a big part of it all. I think that, that's where this role flip starts to happen, where, you have it. And instead of like talking about it, and I think ultimately that's the way that you get rid of jealousy, is you just have to like, hey, I'm feeling jealous. This is what I'm feeling. Let's talk about this. And it's like, of course, like, okay, so now I know what the problem is. What can we do to resolve this? And sometimes maybe it'll be like, well, how important is it for me to go and go check out my buddy's new dirt bike, or whatever the scenario is. It's like, I think when you communicate about these things, then you can start to prioritize them and really find out what to do to let this not become such an issue. Because, the longer the jealousy kind of brews and you don't talk about it, then you start to switch up these roles. You start to make these changes. You have this like, oh, I'm just gonna do what she says because she's so angry. Okay, now she wants to go to work and wants me to stay home. And then it becomes like a whole series of dominoes. It's like, once you start putting the male in these feminine roles, then they have to start being more feminized to do a good job. It's like, well, if I'm going to be with the kids, like let's be more nurturing. Let's be more feminine and understanding with the kids, because just yelling at kids or trying to be real stern with them doesn't work that well. It's like, and so what ends up happening is through this process, the men become more and more emasculated. It's like you're stacking up all of these dominoes for them to be like, okay, now I want what you're having. Let's, try changing these roles and seeing if we can make this work, and then it just continues to go. Then the men become more feminized. And then it's like, by the end of it, it's like the man's doing everything the woman was doing and the woman is not attracted to him.
Yeah,
Like that's it in a nutshell. It's
it
just
is.
like, let's change these roles. Let's take away your power. Let's make you unattractive. And then, and then I'm out,
Because she's become the man, and the male energy with male or with feminized male still doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
So
Well, then
go ahead.
the interesting thing to see is, what kind of men these, you know, more masculine women are attracted to. Once these roles change, once the separation happens, are they then going to be attracted to a more even more masculine man that doesn't have kids, that's just going to be like, yeah, you know, I'm here in my big truck to pick you up, you know, glad you got the husband to take care of the kids tonight. Or, you know, does she want somebody that she can control and manipulate, you know? Because it seems like in the logical sense, she's going to want that more masculine man. You're like, well, I've demasculated my man. He's no longer attractive. Now I need to, you know, now what I am attracted to is going to be this real masculine man. And, but we're just going to have to wait and see how things go in my life and with society in general. But it's, as that's the real question, is like, ultimately for the strong independent women that are making the break, then what is it that you are attracted to? Do you want like a compassionate man that is going to be, you know, really sweet and loving and sincere and have a more feminine qualities? Or are you going to want that like more masculine man who's like, I'm not changing, I'm not doing anything for your kids, like they're your kids, you know?
I have seen this play out, and they might go for, you know, they might date a masculine man, but and if they do go ahead and marry a masculine man, then the the part where he doesn't care for her children doesn't work. Um, it's like women have put themselves between a rock and a hard place where they can't find the guy that they're looking for because he doesn't exist. She's looking for a dichotomy of a person. So it's,
Yeah.
you know, and they do go on and get into relationships, or they just keep Tindering because they're like, you know, like I get what I need. And, you know,
Yeah.
from that, and no man is fitting the bill. So I'm just going to give up on men. But a lot of women, they'll go get into that other relationship, second relationship or third relationship, and it takes a while for them to figure out, no, this isn't working. So that's why a lot of people are not getting married in their second or third, and they're like one foot out the door in a sense, just to see if this is going to work. And that does not work in relationships, because the essence is, if you are going to really be supportive in a relationship, you have to go through layers of levels where there are it's a given in relationships that you're going to have friction, and you're going to go through these times where you're realizing, oh, my partner, that's part of who he is, or that's part of who she is. And a lot of the problem for new relationships is that they get to a certain point and then they realize, oh, I didn't know that, you know, he was going to see that in me, or it doesn't like that, so I'm going to try to keep that a secret, or whatever it is. And in a real true relationship, you have to be vulnerable enough to look at these things that are part of who you are, and not run away from them, but not look at them as, you know, that's your problem or that's my problem. It's like, oh, that's part of who you are, and we're going to accept that you're working on that or growing that or healing that. A friend of mine, Tracy McMillan, talked about it as like, if I have like a bad elbow, you know, when I come to a relationship with a bad elbow, I'm not going to, we don't want to like blame everything on the bad elbow, but we want to know that it's there, and that, okay, this is coming up against my elbow issue. So let's try to work around or realize that I'm coming into this with a bad elbow. So since that's a factor, how can we work with this? And that piece of like being extremely committed, you have to be extremely committed to be able to get through these levels. And that's what a mature, committed relationship does. If you're one foot out the door, which many relationships become, then you're always going to see that out, and you're always going to look at that scenario that could be better, that could be greener. And it takes problem solving, which a lot of men like to do, and it takes commitment on both parts. Mainly, I think right now women, women see the out, and they see being alone as better sometimes. But they're not looking at the big picture, which is culture tells them, you go girl, go get your whatever. So I know I'm going on
Mm-hmm.
tangents here, but it's like if you're a woman who's like, no, I am going to make this work. I mean, not for a man who is mentally ill or abusive or things like that, but for a normal relationship. It's my belief that a lot of relationships actually could work, but the woman is always looking at that one foot out the door possibility. And usually in these situations that I've talked to a lot of men in, men are not like that. They continue to problem solve. They continue to look to see where can we make this work. So if both parties are that way and fully supportive in and committed, that they know there's going to be friction. They know that we're going to have to unpack our vulnerabilities and take them and work with them and not hide and move forward through these layers and levels. If you are honest with each other and really supportive and caring for the team, then you can get through it. But I think the issue is the one foot out the door and the woman feeling like she's got to be in charge. So I know we're trying to say, what is the solution here? So the solution would be, I think you hit it on the head, Zealous, is like, come to your wife or partner as the listening and problem solving and open conversation kind of person, to say, I want to know, and like, what's going on with this jealousy? It looks like jealousy, or maybe not even using that word, but what's eating at you here? I really want to know. I really want to get underneath what that is. And it may not be the thing that is presenting. Like, it may not be that scenario. It's something even deeper, where it's, oh, so you feel like I'm just free, that I'm free to do whatever I want. So let's unpack that. Let's talk about that. What are the things that make you feel like that? And let's look at those things. And if we look at those things that I'm fully willing to change at any time, we can even set up some changes now, then would that be satisfying to you? Would you feel better? And if not, then let's look beyond that. So what's underneath that? And it's a discovery. It's not like a band-aid. It's not like Western medicine where you're like, okay, here's a symptom, let's just take this medicine and squash it. It's like, no, let's look at the root. Let's see what is the deeper cause, because it's going to come up again and again if you don't look at that and unpack it and discuss it. And it could take time. It could take her being vulnerable. But the best thing a man can do is provide a safe space and just be in that mode of, I want to know, and in discovery
Mm-hmm.
mode. And that feels supportive when a woman feels like he wants to know. Oh, okay, he's listening. He is willing to not just do the things that I want, but really know what's behind the motivation and what I actually need and what's emotionally involved with what's happening here. That feels really supportive to a woman. And it may take time over different scenarios that come up, but when she keeps hearing that you're ready to sit there and unpack it with her, then there may be a time where she actually becomes vulnerable. It's really hard for a woman these days to get to that vulnerable space. And, there's a lot to that in what she's been told about men from the day that she was a little girl. So that men are out there to take advantage of you, to blah, blah, blah. And even when you're married to a man, there's that messaging back there that mothers and even dads and well-meaning adults have told this little girl. So there's
I think
that.
there's another issue too of it's hard for people to be vulnerable with their partner if you know your partner's going to try to hold you accountable. There's that like element of like, I don't want to go and bear these deeper feelings and go through this whole process, because then when it comes to a hard time, instead of running away, my partner's going to try to like make me confront this issue, or and then it's like then they feel like they're being controlled or manipulated. But it's like, I'm just trying to help support what you were talking about back last week. And I keep having this idea when you say like, we're going to see how this goes, or having the one one foot out the door. It's like almost like you're just looking for your exit, and as soon as you're looking for your exit, you're not seeing the the beauty of it, and it's like there's some sort of mental switch where it's just like, okay, am I happy, I'm not happy. It's like, well, that's going to go, that's going to change, but when you're asking if I'm happy, it's probably because you're not happy with something. And then then you start looking for your exit. You start like being like, okay, what else is wrong with this relationship, what else is wrong with this situation, instead of looking at like, oh, what do I have to win? It's like, well, what do I have to lose? It's like, well, no, look at what you have. Like, you have a family, you have a kids, and whatever it is that you've worked together to build. And my current relationship state, being separated here, and starting to like date other people, and knowing my ex is dating other people, and just thinking about it, it's like, you know she can date other people and I can date other people, but the quality that we have invested now is that I'm the only one that's ever going to be the parent of her children, and it's like that's such a huge thing, that like, if you have kids with somebody, yeah, the grass might be greener on the other side, but like, what you have with that person of creating life together is like, you're not going to have that with anyone else. So it's really worth doing the work. It's worth making the compromise. It's worth talking about these things that we don't want to talk about. It's worth, you know, taking your partner, holding you accountable as doing something good for you, and not trying to, they're not judging you. They're just wanting to see you do better, and you explained how you wanted to do better. And now, it's difficult. Now that's like the real hard work, and it's on you, and somebody that you care about is watching. And I think that's where people want to bug out,
Mhm.
you know, and it's understandable, but that's not being a strong person. That's not being a, that's turning away from the growth. It's turning away from the help.
Well, in this
So
convenience society where we want quick rewards, it makes sense to turn away. But I want to tell whomever is watching that, as far as a woman who is in a relationship that is by no means perfect, but really truly enjoyable, that there are greater rewards if you switch your dynamic to being committed fully and not one foot out the door. And the rewards are actually going through the friction. Actually, those are the rewards. It's like you don't realize that when you, I mean, if you think of it as, say, a child who is trying to like ride a bike or jump off something for the first time, or, just, it's like, I'm sure you've experienced that with your children. It's like you see them and they're like trying to jump for the first time, and there's that fear, and then they might fall, a few times. But when you actually break through, you go to this other level that you never turn back. It's like you've gone through this growth. And when you do that with a partner, both of you have gone through this growth that is tremendous. I mean, it's like you have built so much more rock into your foundation because there's this knowing. It's like this solid knowing of, okay, we just went through that and I understand you better. I know you more. I get that. And there's still more beyond that. It's not like we're done. You never get done. You just discover more and more and more. But the rewards, what happens is it becomes so like solid, and you just have this sense of deep trust. And then when something else happens, it's like you have a foundation that you feel is rooted. And there can be times when it feels a little like, oh, those rocks are getting a little squirrely again, but there's still that bedrock underneath because you've gone through these hard situations. And you just feel that underneath, maybe that new layer of gravel that's a little slippery. So, I think that people they're not like actually reaping the benefits. There's so much more benefit if you are in that relationship for good. And
Hmm.
if you know that, it becomes easier. It really is
Yeah.
actually like what I do is not hard. That's the fallacy. Is like actually, an entrepreneur said to my mastermind group, the key to know of success is it's not that hard. So what he meant was it's just a shift of perspective. And when you do the things that seem like work, you actually set yourself up for ease of success. So if you can get your mind wrapped around not that convenience mindset, but like doing the work is just putting those steps down to that path of success. And might seem when you look at those stones that you're going to lay the path on that they're heavy, but once you do them once, and that path is set. So that's how it is with parenting. That's how it is with like setting a relationship up. It's kind of all the same. It's like you put in the work because you see the long game. You see that long game. And it might feel a little hard with that one stone, but the more stones you put down, the more muscle memory you have. And then you've already built that path. So there's just this ease. So in the big picture, just stick in and really be committed, do the work. And I hate to say work because that sounds so ugh, you know, but just know that it's
It's
easier.
Yeah, I think I have this real clear visualization that I think people are unaware that when you start pulling back from a relationship, it actually makes things so much more difficult. Where it's like you're saying, where if you just go full in and you commit to it and you're like, this is a challenging time, we'll get through this, and you don't have doubt, then you'll get through it a lot easier than when you go, I don't know about this. Like you start pulling back and then it becomes difficult, and everywhere you go it's sticky and it's a trap and things aren't working out, and it's like, you know and it can be taken, so like you said, it's like this is where you do the real work. Well, work can be play if you just make it fun.
Hmm.
It's that you don't want to do it that makes it a challenge, where it's like when you actually get in it, it's just like, no, I love talking with my partner. We like knowing how each other feel, and we like communicating, and that gives us a better understanding and closeness. But it's like when you start pulling back, it's like, I don't want to be vulnerable. You know, I don't want to show my weakness here. And then you just, you become more distant, even though you're living a life with this person.
Hmm. It's like procrastination when you think about that. It's like if you just show up and you just take one step at a time, the work gets done. So it's really showing up. And I believe in this society, we tend to think that there are hacks and workarounds that we can skip the hard work, but it really isn't that hard. It's if you show up and you're present, then it's amazing how it all just works out just by being there in it and taking steps. And I have this analogy that I think is really perfect for this. I've talked about this a lot in like life coaching ways. But when I was living in Reno, Nevada, I used to go to Tahoe all the time. I was a TV reporter there. And so I was a terrible skier, but I wanted to get good. I was like, okay, I'm committing to becoming good because now I'm in like ski country. So I would go to Tahoe and I was like a green level skier. But I decided to take a lesson one day from someone that I knew, his friend, who was an expert skier, a pro. And so he took me to the bunny slopes and he said, okay, just let go of your poles. We're going to drop them here. We're not even going to use them. And I want you to put your arms out. And I want you to face down the mountain, which was very small, like the very slope was very small, and just lean forward. And so it was like leaning in with your heart, basically. You just lean in and he's like, now just trust that your leaning forward is actually going to make you more in control. And when you want to turn, you're leaning forward, you just shift from one foot to the other. And so he took me from that slope to a blue slope to a black diamond slope in one day, doing that same thing. And how this relates to the analogy of life is that when we face downhill, the task we have to do, and we lean into with our heart to it, then we are in the present moment. When we are squirrely and worried and we're like, I don't know, I'm worried, I'm going to pull back and not put my vulnerabilities forward, then we're less in control because we're not in the present moment. We're in our heads. We're thinking so much of like, I don't know, but when you're actually there leaning into something, you can make those quick shifts based on what's happening in the present moment. And then what is at the bottom is if you do fall, life actually catches you in the right place. So sometimes we fall and we're like, oh, see, that didn't work. But if you open up to the possibility that you just fell because you're in the right place to see something, know something, learn something, and if you open up to your partner about it to say, okay, here we are, we're here in this messy middle, is what some people call it. So let's like look at that, unpack it. How did we get here? And where do we want to go? Let's lean into that and keep going. And so I think that there's so much of trying to escape, trying to lean back, not being in the present, not being vulnerable in our society and looking perfect, looking like we're just skiing like perfectly. Whereas that's not life. We need to lean in. We need to like hot dog sometimes down that ski slope and be messy, but be authentic and like full-hearted with our partner to say, I'm here for you. I am present. It might not be perfect. It might not be what I think you want me to be, but I'm going to show you that I'm committed. I am who I am for you, and I'm right here. And so let's go down this hill together, full-heartedly in the present moment. And that feels like a partner, a real partnership, and very honest. So if we can do that with our partner and do that in life generally, then we are able to shift at each moment that something arises. And if we do it together, then it's like, oh, we're in this, going down the slope together. And our family feels it, the kids feel it, it feels cohesive. So that's that analogy that I think might possibly help to see the physical feeling of really fully being in it, not looking out to where you can jump to. If this slope is not good, you always can look at another one like, oh, that looks better, everybody's skiing better over there, but just do where you are. Get in, commit, and do it with heart. So, you know, that's how I operate, and it seems to work.
Yeah, it really comes to being genuine, and I think that's something that, culturally we have to overcome, is that there's this, whole practice of creating a lure, that, men and women both do. And I think that it's really falsifying the foundation of your relationship. It's just like, you have to kind of really recognize, if you want to be if you want your relationship to be really good and stable, you need to come in with a good foundation. And that's just really like, accepting your faults and your strengths, and not trying to hold or hide your faults. I think that that's something that's so common with all of the makeup and clothing options that women do. It's just like, well, we're trying to like get the best mate, and maybe like what seems like the best mate might not actually be the most long-term compatible person for you. And actually just kind of like, being able to be comfortable with who you are without having to create a facade is going to bring somebody who really appreciates and values you, and not coming to terms when they see behind the mask. It's I think that's something that kind of is a difficult thing, where it's like, you get involved into this relationship, and then things start to switch. There's like classic jokes about, like, oh, after you're married, then then you can stop wearing these clothes, and you can eat what you want, and and those are all just jokes, but there's some truth that goes in there, where it's like people are trying to create this um, this you know most beautiful appearance possible, but it's not necessarily who they really are. And it's different for everyone. But I almost, for me at this point, I'm like, I want to see somebody that can be genuine and not have to have a whole facade to be attracted to them. It's just like, I want to find somebody who's just as attractive to me um, in the morning without any makeup as they are once they're all done up, because that's that's who you're really marrying into. That's who you're going to be with, and it's just a superficial beauty. That's just talking about like what's going on the surface. And there's something that's, what's really important is how we do that with our own emotionals and with our own emotions, and how that emotional facade is yet another thing where people don't want to be vulnerable in the early stages of a relationship because they're afraid they're going to scare the person away. Well, if you scare that person away, that's good, because they weren't meant to be with you. You need to find somebody that's not afraid to accept your challenging, trying times, and that's where they're going to be able to love you unconditionally. It's like, I love you unconditionally, I will accept all of these things, but it's good to have a clear idea of what it is, and not you know end up in a relationship and then go, oh, there's this little broken hearted girl inside that is only now coming out. Before you were this strong, independent woman, but really you've got all of this, uh, issues from your childhood that haven't been addressed. You're just trying to overcome them, and then not being able to work through that with your partner, that you're afraid that you're going to take that as criticism, or that it's, they're going to judge you. Well, no, your partner's not going to criticize you or judge you. They're going to help you through these things. They're going to help work, and it's going to give them some understanding, so that they're going to know how to not trigger you, or to know what things are triggers. And it's just really where being honest and real with the person you're getting involved with is so important. And it's I think it's becoming less common, because we have all of these social media fronts and these dating app fronts, and it's just creating clickbait, and it's like, well, you should be putting yourself as who you really are, and try to be genuine as possible, and look for somebody who's being as genuine as possible, and as just as sincere. So
Mm-hmm. It comes down to, like, when you come into this relationship, you don't want to dump all your everything on somebody. That's too much, and then you don't want to actually mask everything either. There's sort of that middle. So, like, you've got the broken elbow, um, and you might not mention that first off. You might not be all about your broken elbow and, like, tell the whole story about everything that relates to the broken elbow that colors your entire existence based on your broken elbow. You might want to sort of, like, reveal that as natural, like organically, as when it comes up. And then know that that's just part of something that doesn't have to always color your relationship. And so it's a gentle moving into the relationship from the beginning, as this is who I am. You're so right in that when I was looking for a husband, I know that sounds weird, but I had a fertility issue. So I only had 2 years till I knew I wouldn't be able to have babies anymore. So I went on this quest to find a husband, and I put out on Match.com that this man needs to be ready to have kids tomorrow and get married tomorrow because I don't have time. And that was actually wonderful, because it was so clarifying to these guys. They're like, I get you. I know where you are in life. I'm ready. And they were fully ready to go, like just to be a family right away. And it takes so much out of the it's not like it made it less sexy at all. It actually made it more. Because when a man knows and understands what you're about, then he can get on board with like this mission. And then it feels like this team already, because it's like, I get you, I know what you're about. We're doing this, we're having a family, and so I told Aaron, I think it was like I had only like known him for like 5 days, but I told him where I was at with my life, and I expected him to like just turn on a dime and like see, you know, and if he was the wrong person, he would have, and that would have been fine. But he knew when he was getting in what he was getting into, and that actually helped. So I think our relationship from the get-go was based on real honesty of like not trying to play on or manipulate, but just like, here's the deal. This is what I come with. And it set us on like this, I was thinking on this path of like real honesty. And I think that, my brother-in-law and my cousin, when we had our engagement party, they said to Aaron, I heard them say to him, oh, watch, in like a few years, maybe like 5 years, you'll regret that you're married. And I was like, what? And I think the thing is that there's this image, not just for women of the Cinderella marriage, but also for men. There's this idealization of maybe what marriage is today. And if you know that it's this long-term partnership where somebody is there for you, then, and you're both committed to that, then it's not going to be like that. It's those relationships where the woman is like, I need you for this, all this stuff, blah, here's all my problems, here's, and you're like, whoa, and then there's a lot of other things that come along with it, the Karen stuff and all of that. But if you come to it really honestly and supportively, then without those fantastical visions that never will be, then you're entering into like the reality of what marriage is. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to shift to, what is marriage? It's not this, oh, for women, it's, I'm going to get this ring and then I'm going to be happy. Really, it's like that's what a lot of girls think, young girls into adulthood. I can't wait for the wedding. I'm going to have this ring. That means everything is good. And parents do the same thing. They're like, once they're married, I feel better. It's like, no, that's not where it ends. That's where it becomes interesting. And like, that's where we actually become adults. That's where we have to show up. And when we show up, we reap such rewards, but it's not like, okay, now I can relax, it's, or pretend, but it's like, no, let's do this. Let's do this life. Let's do it together. And that's where it's so enjoyable. So I wish a lot of people could see that, could know that. And yeah, it takes showing up, it takes honesty and vulnerability. I guess maybe those are the takeaways. And if you do that, then the jealousy fades. It's just like you don't have jealousy if you're, I know the phrase now, in it together is like the thing, but if you're literally in it together, then you're not alone. You're not separate. You're not fighting for your own stuff. So, yeah. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's really one of those keys is, sticking through it and being in it and talking and working through stuff. And it's got to be coming from both sides. I think that whenever somebody's in a relationship that is, struggling, it's like, you got to be able to not want to avoid the conversation. Like I totally was guilty of like, okay, let's just keep getting through this and not try to have these confrontational conversations, but it's also, it takes both parts to go and say, hey, let's not be confrontational. Let's be vulnerable. Let's not take things as criticism or judgment, but just to understand what each other's feeling. And so, yeah, I think it's important to initiate these conversations and to find a way to do it so that people aren't feeling judged or aren't feeling critiqued. I think that is something that, you know, we need to start teaching in schools and understand more of, is how to nuance language so that, you know, you can communicate things without making people feel uncomfortable or brash, but then sometimes you also just have to recognize that, like, you can't dance around topics. Let's just kind of, you know, let's put it on the table and not be offended, or if you are offended, to just, hey, let's work through this, and I think that's, when we're talking about the work, it's like, it's really controlling your emotional reaction. So much of it is just really a matter of, like, we have these emotional reactions, and we need to be able to control our emotions. It's like, and the way that you're going to do that is through practice. It's like, when you continue to avoid these things, and it kind of just builds the emotions up to when you do talk about them. So, it's like they're talking about that with, our current state with the defund the police and police officers, is it's like, you need to train how to de-escalate. Like, that's what's really more important. You don't come in with a baton. You need to train people to how to de-escalate, and a lot of it just comes in with, like, being not creating fear, and just saying, hey, like, what is it? Let's talk, let's interact, what can I do, let me listen to you. I think that's one of those real important things of, like, being able to listen. It's just like the classic one for, how to get along with a woman is to be a good listener. And that's just, it's anybody. It's like, we need to be able to just kind of listen and understand, and not have, like, judgment, or not try to correct them. It's like, everybody is entitled to their feeling, and what they're feeling is legitimate. It's, and the more you hear it and the more practice you have, the better you're going to be at it. But when things escalate and you have anger and emotions, then you're not making any headway. I think that's it's a matter of having some real emotional maturity and emotional intelligence, and to just recognize, like, don't react. You have to be like, okay, I'm feeling this way, this is understandable, but now it's my turn to react the way that I want, and not have just a knee-jerk instinct reaction, or to feel insulted and want to go, claw back at your partner over something. So
Here's one way to make that
yeah.
easier, is to, and here, I see it as a visual, to build a container. So if you build a container, it can contain, it's like an arena, but an arena can be like a fighting arena, or like a comforting space. So you've got, on one end, this assumption that that person is not there to support you, that you have to fight for everything that you are going to get. And then there's the other perspective, where this person actually has my back all the time, unconditionally. It's like knowing that anything they do is motivated by what the entire family needs, and what supports the entire family. So if that person is in this container that's built on this assumption over here, that this is a safe space, that anything that I do and he does and is said is really, like, supported and contained in this unconditional loving space, and that he has my best interest at heart. And if she has his best interest at heart, and they have the family's best interest at heart, then anything in this container feels safe. So there's not that fear of that assumption that someone is trying to undermine you, or hurt you, or get the better of you, or to be right, or out argue you, or criticize you, or so even if there is talk that's maybe constructive criticism, or like the really hard conversations where it's like, I want to say this because I think you need to hear it so that you can see and assess how we can shift out of whatever's happening. if there's an assumption that this container is like holding the family for the best interest of the family, it is so much easier for any person in that to accept what's being said. So that's underneath the reaction. Like the reactions happen, they're going to happen. When we hear something, we're like, am I in trouble? Or did I do something wrong? Or am I bad? Or am I, all those things that like a child will think. And then the defensiveness, and then our ability to like, okay, step back. This is not a personal attack. This person actually loves me. This container is safe. I can tread lightly with my vulnerability and start to open up if I feel I'm in the safe container. And that assumption is what is needed. This container, that we are in a safe container. That has to be built. And what is built right now based in society is this other container of fighting. It's an arena. So
well, let's look at what we have going on in our society today. Where what do a majority of couples spend their evenings doing to unwind? We watch TV together, entertainment, and it's like, so you have this container being like your living room, and you're focusing on the screen that has drama and action and conflict is what's fueling this entertainment. And to think about, 50 years ago, and a million years before that, it's like you would come together at a fire, so it's like when you have that fire, you have something that's warmth, and it's you're drawn to look at it, but you're inviting this conversation. That becomes that space for you to have a conversation about your day and what was going on. So I just, as soon as you started to say container and you started doing this visualization, it just became really clear to me that we create this container. The container is created for us in our living room, and so many of us are looking at television and as our entertainment, and instead of having these real conversations, we're getting these imprints of conflict and action and intensity, and so that carries over into your relationship, so I think that there's a real valuable thing to go and look at, like, hey, have a fire pit in your yard, and make a point to have a fire and sit out there and talk with your partner, and to realize that that's just as important. That's more important than watching the new Netflix series, and to really recognize that's going to be a good way for you to connect with your partner and to have these conversations, because you have to let these conversations come about in a like, let's talk about this.
right.
It's like whenever you're like, we need to have a conversation, it's like,
oh no, right. Somebody's in trouble.
No one in the history of time has ever been calmer because you said calm down. No child has ever told you what they needed when you said use your words.
Right.
Like it's not the way that it really is. You have to create this safe vessel space to just talk about things, and to not be offended, and to just listen.
I think what's important is to be present enough to just observe and notice what's going on with your partner. So we become so busy in our lives, and like you said, we're looking externally at things instead of sensing internally, sensing ourselves and sensing our partner and sensing our children, what's happening internally. And so if we just take the time to observe, notice, take in, like all the time, like not only when we need to talk to somebody or get something from them, but like just caringly look at how they're walking, look at how they're holding their body, look at their facial expression, listen to their breath. A breath can tell you if somebody's exasperated, if they're exhausted, if they, their voice deepens, if they feel comfortable or like relaxed or want to be intimate. There's so much that are clues to your partner, and we're so busy looking at our phones, on devices, getting outside stimulation that we're so in the society used to, that we don't take that just observation time. And I think that can give you so much more than actually what they're saying. And then you can support them in ways that they're not even saying, where you realize, oh, they must need, like a foot rub right now, or maybe they need me to just go make some food and bring them a cold drink, or without being asked to do it. It's like those things those things go beyond that. That's the nurturing that can happen when, as a woman to do for a man, or a man to do for his wife. Both ways, it's like that speaks volumes to support a person. And so it doesn't always have to be a confrontation. But what happens is, when that support, when that nurturing happens, that's when the conversations open up. That's when organically they unfold and someone feels safe. And it can be a 2-minute conversation in passing, where it's like, oh, I feel safe enough, like in the person's head, to say this. And then that person is so open to be receiving, because they're in this dynamic that is so nurturing, that they're like, got it. There doesn't have to be like major, but it's like you're setting the tone for the relationship and the communication to happen, which doesn't always have to be in a serious big talk of words. It can be so quick, and that's the ease that can happen when you have this container, and you daily, not just once a day, but all the time, observe what's happening with your partner. It's really paying attention. And if you garden at all, it's a lot like gardening. Like, you can be turn from a black thumb to a green thumb. If you just look at your plants, are they wilting? Are they looking dry and like crispy? Or are they like happy? Or are they looking like they might need like something else other than water, like vitamins or something, like some fertilizer or something? It's really that observational sense that a woman is really meant for. That's actually innate to our DNA, is that observational sense. But when we get into the alpha, we are so in our heads that we lose that sense. And our children need that sense. Our children sense that we're sensing them, and then they can relax. They actually can be less cortisol driven out of fear. That's not even rational to them, because if they don't feel that we're sensing them, then they need to tap us constantly. Mom, because we're not sensing, we're not present, we're not in that energy of like receiving whatever it is that their messaging, their body language, and other things that are not verbal are telling us. So it's a mode to be in as far as women. This is the feminine matriarch that I'm talking about. It's holding this container, being, sensing, and operating from this place. And it's so deeply felt. So I can't remember where we were with this, but these are the things that support a family that a modern woman can do, but she can't do if she's doing the very male way of operating in her head.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Some of these topics that we touched about with feminism and femininity, I realized that I, in the past, have been, what I thought as a feminist, but it's really, I support femininity. And I think that's something we really need to go and like look at, how there's two different things that sound the same, but as like our social takeaway is actually shows they're very different, and it's important to support femininity, and it's different than to support the feminist movement. There's two different things going on there, and for women to go and look at that and be like, am I trying to be this strong feminine woman, or am I actually, do I want to be this feminine woman that has strength?
Exactly. Very different. They sound the same, but they're very different. And I think we could probably talk about that next week. There's a lot in there.
Good bit. Yeah.
But this has been a really, I think, a really interesting conversation. We always never know exactly what comes out of it, but we started with the jealousy of somebody else's happiness, and we have unpacked a lot of it, of why that is, and have given you some ways that you can, really shift that. So I hope that you consider this. I know it takes some doing, but we're here every week. So you've got the support. And if you want to get in touch with us, comment, ask us questions, we're here for you. So if there's anything else, Ellis?
I'm
All
good.
right. Well, then we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us, and share this with people that you think it might really help. Take care.